Hello and welcome to the Religious Studies A2 Philosophy of Religion revision session. Today I aim to go over the part of the course that tackles atheism, looking at the rejection of belief in deities. So I'm hopefully within the next 40 minutes hope to reinforce your understanding of atheism and agnosticism, reinforce your understanding of the development of atheism. I'm sure you've studied within your course, to try and reinforce your understanding for the reasons why people reject the idea of deities, and to show understanding of a better understanding of maybe how to answer a question on this part of the module. Okay, let's have a look at what's expected of you within the specification. So first of all, we need to have a look at the idea of rejecting beliefs in deities, the difference between agnosticism and atheism. We have to have a quick look at the rise of new atheism, or what's also known as anti-theism. And then we need to address the main criticism that new atheism has of religious beliefs: non-thinking, infantile, and impeding scientific progress. I don't think we will have enough time in this session to address the second part of this topic, so we'll come back to that later on in another session. So here are some example questions that could come up in an assessment or an examination that tackle the parts of the course that we are going to be looking at today. So these are just examples. Obviously, other questions could exist on this topic. So explain the difference between agnosticism and atheism, outline the rise of new atheism, or what's known as anti-theism, outline the rise of atheism, or the idea of rejecting beliefs in deities, explore reasons for the rise of atheism, explain why some people reject the belief in gods or deities, explain atheism's main criticism of religious belief. So you should be able to answer these questions by the end of this session, hopefully. So we'll start with having a look at the rise or the development of atheism, of which new atheism has come from. So what I've tried to do here is try to summarize the main periods of the growth of atheism through time. So I've tried to classify them in the 5 stages that you can see on the timeline. So starting off from the 5th century, looking at the classical Greek atheists, atheism, and looking at the philosophers and what they've contributed towards the idea of rejecting gods and deities. Then we moved on to the second. I've looked at the 15th and the 16th century, looking at the Renaissance and Reformation. Moving on to the third period, the Age of Enlightenment in the 17th and 18th century, looking briefly at the 20th century before actually looking at the current century, looking at the 21st century, and we will be concentrating there on the new atheist movement. So what I've done is I've tried to summarize the 5 main periods and just have a quick look, maybe some revision for you that you've done this already in your course. Just trying to summarize the main contributions and ideas that have been seen within the 5 periods on the timeline. So there'll be A, B, C, D, and E. So we'll start off with the first period, looking at Greek atheism. So ancient Greece is seen as the starting point of philosophy, and you get a lot of the classical philosophers trying to contribute towards different themes and topics. So this is when people started to think about the existence of God and religion, and then many of the Greek philosophers were a bit skeptical about the concept of God and religious belief. So you may have come across in your notes and in your lessons, um, these are some of the philosophers that you could mention or refer to in a question that would ask you to outline the development of atheism. So Protagoras, he wrote that man is the measure of all things, meaning that man is the most intelligent being, and he places uh, more emphasis on humans rather than any other god or deities or any supernatural beings. Um, he was seen as a bit of a rebel. He was exiled from Athens because of his opinion and his philosophy, and some of his work was burnt because of his anti-theistic um, opinions and philosophy. Aristotle was also skeptical, and he was citing that the ideas of God were pointless, and he said in his words, prayers and sacrifices to gods are in vain. They are pointless. Socrates, seeing the idea of a god is childish, and it goes as far as saying that it's shameful to be thinking of a god and really embarrassing for humankind to be actually considering the existence of a god. You can link these ideas obviously to the work that you may have done or studied in the course with Freud later on, again saying the same kind of things, saying religious belief as being infantile and childish. And then you have the last philosopher there as an example. There are more, obviously. Um, Diogenes, religions and gods are not relevant to everyday life. And he has a quotation there. When I look at sailors, scientists, and philosophers, man is the wisest of all. When I look at priests, prophets, and interpreters of dreams, nothing is so contemptible. So, obviously, seeing more emphasis and worth to science than any idea of a supernatural God and religious beliefs. Moving on to the second period on the timeline, time B, the 15th and 16th century, the Renaissance and Reformation. This is when the term atheist was coined, and it was meant to be an insulting term for those people who did not believe in any deity or God. The third period on the timeline is the Age of Enlightenment, a period in Europe where philosophy and science uh, empowered people during this period. Enlightenment thinkers questioned any traditional authority as religion and embraced the idea that humanity could improve itself through rational thinking instead of relying on blind faith and on religions. One of the results of this age was rejecting traditional ideas such as Christianity, such ideas about God. You have examples of thinkers that you have already studied in your ethics or may have studied in your ethics module. Bentham and Mill, their rejection really of traditional religious ethics. And within your philosophy module, again in the AS course and in the A2 course, obviously, Hume would come into mind with his critique of traditional religious ideas, such as miracles, if you've studied the miracles aspect of the course. think about the weaknesses of the cosmological and teleological arguments that you studied in the AS course. Any weakness, obviously, to any theory would dismiss religious thought, especially religious thought about the existence of God. And then the fourth period within the timeline is the 20th century. So many people no longer accepted, it was no longer acceptable, to hold traditional views of God as being an omnipotent being. Instead, people have moved on through thinking that God, the idea of a God, it could be more symbolic, a more powerful symbol in the lives of the human mind rather than existing in the outside world. God has no objective or empirical existence in the real world. So this could be quite synoptic if you link it to what Jung has been saying, or even Freud, looking at the reality of God and the God being within the mind more than a reality in the outside world. Again, I'm sure you've seen in your notes that Bishop John Robinson supported the idea. He was a bishop, but he had moved into thinking that God was the idea of God was symbolic rather than a reality in the outside work. He was inspired by Jung, so there's some cross-referencing there within your course, being synoptic, and he taught that the concept of God was within the mind. Traditional religious theology places God outside in the real world. However, Robinson places God in the human mind. So the idea of God existing as a reality in the outside world is starting to get less popular in this this period of time. Again, communist countries became evident. Communism became evident in several countries, which saw religion obviously as a threat to the authority within those countries. And the idea as well in the 20th century that travel became easier and cheaper, so people would actually visit different countries, looking at different lifestyles and different beliefs. And they saw that when they brought the different religious beliefs together, they saw that they actually would contradict one another, and this would cause people to turn away from the theistic beliefs about God. And then that brings us to the fifth period within the timeline, the present century, looking at the 21st century, which has become more secular in society, and people tend to look more to religious and empirical evidence to support their views, therefore turning them away from the idea of God, not relying on blind faith, looking for evidence for answers for human life. So in the 21st century, it's been more of a robust form of rejection, a lot more vocal, a lot more the idea of protesting against religion. Instead of just not believing and not trying to justify their non-belief in a deity or God, they are much more vocal in the 21st century in trying to get people to not believe in the existence of a God. This has been coined as New Atheism or the New Atheist Movement, and they go so far as to try and protest against religious belief in a God. They see it as old-fashioned or out of date, and they would even go as far as saying that religious belief is a threat to the survival of the entire human race. So the term was coined by Christopher Hitchens. So you may have studied maybe the Four Horsemen. We'll come back to the Four Horsemen later on in the presentation, but you should know about the four horsemen and their views as new atheists. So if we move on within this part of the course, and we need to know what is atheism, what is agnosticism, and see the differences between them. So we'll start off with what is atheism. So quite simply put, atheism is the belief that there is no God, that God does not exist. Just be careful that when you try and define atheism, that you don't actually explain it as a person who doesn't believe. That would be wrong, because an atheist would have a belief. Their belief is that there is no God. It's quite simply put as a belief that science has the answers, not religions. Looking for scientific facts, looking for scientific evidence, empirical evidence, evidence that can be proved or experienced. And therefore, if it cannot be proved or experienced, then you reject the thought or the belief. So there are four types of atheism. We have weak or negative atheism. Weak or negative atheism, we'll start off with this, is when an atheist doesn't make the positive claim that God does not exist. The atheist says that he does not believe in God, but does not argue that this position is true. A weak or a negative atheist would not say, this is why I don't believe in a God. So weak atheism is the belief that there is no God, but a weak atheist would not try and justify why they wouldn't believe in the existence of a God. Strong atheism is this kind of atheist would give reasons, and they would try to defend his or her belief in the lack of existence of God. So a strong positive atheist gives reasons for the non-belief in a God, if you put it that way. They would say that they don't believe in God, and this is why, and then they would try and give evidence or reasons why they do not believe in the existence of God. Then we have the third, which is protest atheism. Protest atheism is a complete rejection of God. While atheism is a disbelief in God, the protesting atheist would refuse to accept that God exists, and if God exists, they would say that he is not worthy of worship. If you just try and link this into the work that you may have done in your AS work, in the philosophy AS module on the problem of evil and suffering, you can see those kind of ideas in that unit that you studied last year, maybe. If there was a God, the fact that he lets us suffer from evil would mean, if he did exist, some people would say that he's not worthy of worshipping. So there's quite an example, a good example. If you haven't seen it, I'd tell you to try and look for the clip online where Stephen Fry argues with a priest. He's asked if he was wrong as being a protest atheist, and God did exist, and if he reached the pearly gates after dying, what would he say to God? And his answer is really archetypal of the protest atheist kind of way of thinking. He'd say that he wouldn't want to go into heaven, he wouldn't want to be in God's gang, and he certainly wouldn't and couldn't understand why somebody would be worshipping such a God when the innocent people are suffering. So that's a clip for you to try and look. It is online if you Google Stephen Fry and atheism. So that's protest atheism. And then, of course, you've got the fourth type, is the new atheism or the new atheist movement. And this is the belief that religion is not only outdated, that it's old-fashioned. It's not only the idea that there is no God, that obviously they follow empirical scientific answers, but they are more vocal in their idea that they see the religion and religious belief and belief in God is actually going to be a threat to the survival of human race in the future. So those are the four types. If you have a question asking you to examine or um, explore the ideas of atheism. And so we move into agnosticism. So we have to try and explain and make sure that we understand what agnosticism is. Some people try and define agnosticism as a person who sits on the fence, who doesn't know if there's a God or not, which is kind of okay. But there are better ways of trying to explain what agnosticism means. So agnosticism is the belief that it is not possible to know if there is a God or not. So the meaning of the term agnostic has come from the Greek, and it comes with without knowledge. It means without knowledge. So implying that we as humans, we are without the knowledge of if there is a God or not. So this is quite a good way of trying to explain what agnosticism is. Human knowledge is limited. There is only so much that we can find out or we know. And we therefore cannot know if there is a God or not. So try and include the word limited. Our limited, although we have huge knowledge and understanding of different things in life, and we have scientific knowledge of different things, after all said and done, human knowledge is limited. Therefore, the evidence to try and persuade people if there is a God or if there is not a God is not available for humans to actually find out. So an agnostic is not ready to say there is a God, but an agnostic would not be ready to say that there is no God either, basically because we don't have enough knowledge or understanding. And we will never, well, some would say we will never get the knowledge to prove or disprove the idea of God. So there are three types of agnosticism: the strong, the weak, and the apathetic or the indifferent agnostics. So if we look at the first one, the strong agnosticism, this view is the question that the question of the existence of or non-existence of God is not known due to the limitations of human knowledge. We will never be able to verify the beliefs empirically or scientifically. We never will have the answers. Weak agnosticism is a bit different. It's the view that the non-existence or the existence of God is currently unknown. Honey, we don't actually have the knowledge at the moment, but the knowledge, we could find some new knowledge in the future. Therefore, a weak agnostic with withhold judgment until there is suitable evidence, if we have any at all, in the future. So at the moment, we don't have the knowledge for or against God, but we may or may not in the future. You can see how that contrasts to the first one, strong agnosticism. Strong agnosticism say we will never find out. Weak means we may in the future. And then apathetic or indifferent, if you have apathy or you're indifferent to something, quite simply, you're not bothered about it. It doesn't actually impede on your life in any way. So the view that no arguments can prove or disprove the existence of God, if one or more of the deities exist, they do not seem to care about the fate of human beings. Therefore, their existence has little effect on their life. There may be a God, there may be they may not be a God, but basically, I'm not really bothered. So that's really, in simple terms, what an apathetic, indifferent agnostic would think. And this is a diagram that I've come across and I have used while teaching atheism and agnosticism. There are some different terms or new terms there if you want to have a look at them, but it just gives you the three um, ways of thinking: atheism, agnosticism, and theism, the belief that there is a God. And then in the middle with the subcategories, you have the strong, the moderate, and the weak, which is a bit different to what we've just discussed. And then there's a statement that actually explains how they would actually try and be vocal about their belief. So could be useful. So we'll move on to a new aspect of the module. We've already looked at the definitions of atheism, agnosticism, and we've looked at the development of atheism through time. We now have to look at the idea of rejecting belief in deities. Don't be scared of the word deities. Um, Deities are supernatural beings that are considered to be divine and that they are worthy of worship in one way or another. If you want to simplify it, think of it as gods if you want to. So why would people reject the belief in gods, deities as supernatural beings, divine beings? So I'd like you to pause this presentation here, and I want you to think, first of all, do you believe that God exists or not? And try and think of reasons why you think God exists. But if you do think that God doesn't exist, try and create a list of why you do not think God exists. If you do think that God exists, then try and cross over to an atheist way of thinking. And why would atheists deny, or would they protest against the existence of God? So pause the button and just reflect on belief in God and not believing in God, and why people would not believe maybe in the existence of a God. So I'm sure that you have thought of one or two reasons why yourself or why an atheist would not believe in the existence of a God. I've put a link there that could be quite useful for you. It's a short article giving the main reasons why people would reject the idea of God or divinity. Um, so here is a list of different reasons why people would reject the idea of a God. If I show them to you now. So if you we'll read through them now. How many of these did you actually think of from the last task that we did in the last slide? And if a question did come up asking you to explain why people would reject God's existence, would you be able to explain all of these, or most of these, or some of these in your answers? So the first one is problems with God's attributes, his characteristics, his nature, upbringing, assumption, lack of evidence or failure to verify God, science and empiricism, Occam's razor, you may have come across that in your course last year. Philosophy arguments are weak or they've been challenged. The problem of evil and suffering. Psychology linking religion to with emotions and neurosis. Sociology, its management of society. Media and charismatic figures. So what I'd like you to do is to pause the presentation on this slide and go through every one of these bullet points. And could you write a short paragraph or explain how these points, one by one, could be reasons why people would reject God's existence? So press the pause button now and try and go through as many as you can. Okay, so why do people reject God's existence? What I'm going to do now is I'm going to go through these bullet points that you've been working on in the last slide, and we'll just give you a brief summary of how these points try to prove that God does not exist. So the first one was a problem with the characteristics of God. So in modern times, some ideas about God have gone beyond logic. They don't make sense to many people in the modern world. So, for example, God is seen as a transcendent God. He is a God that he is out there beyond this world. But then within religions like Christianity, God is also seen as a personal God who is here now in the world, who is listening to our prayers and answering prayers. Well, the two ideas tend to contradict one another. He's a transcendent God, he belongs and he is outside of this world, but again, he is a personal God. He is an almighty God. He is all powerful, as we have looked at in the course in year 12. So if he is all powerful and he can do anything, then he can create a stone or a boulder that is so heavy that he cannot lift it. Well, if it's so heavy, he can't lift it. He can't lift it. He's not all powerful. But if he can't create this boulder or rock or stone, then that implies that he is not all powerful and not almighty. And then there are problems, obviously, with the all-loving God. If he was an all-loving, omnibenevolent God, he wouldn't want us to suffer. So why do we suffer? Again, this has links to your course in year 12. Upbringing. Obviously, people grow up in a secular family or a secular society, or that they have had an upbringing in a communist country where religion is not available, or is frowned upon. And education as well, being able to teach something different to religion, concentrating more maybe on scientific evidence rather than religions. And bear in mind, in some countries, RE is not on the school timetable at all. So upbringing in so many ways can be a reason for people rejecting God. Assumption. Many people start off their way of thinking as not believing in a God, and they are atheists and they expect to be persuaded that there is a God. And obviously, people haven't been able to persuade them that God exists. So their starting point of thinking is an atheist standpoint, and they want to be, or they expect to be persuaded, but they have, as yet have not been persuaded to actually believe in God's existence. Lack of evidence, not being able to verify God. Um, Obviously, not many people have, no, not every person has had a religious experience. Again, this links to other parts of your AS and your A-level course. So think about the course that you're doing this year, looking at miracles, and the course you did last year on religious experiences, the power of prayer, visions, and so forth. Not all people have had religious experience, so that leads them to actually not believe in God's existence. Science and empiricism, obviously, there is no need for God in the modern world. If you want answers, you follow science and try and look for evidence. So you could refer to the Big Bang Theory, evolution, natural selection, which I'm sure you've been doing when you were studying the teleological arguments last year. People actually look for scientific answers in modern life. Occam's razor, you may have come across this as a philosophical idea, a way of thinking. It's derived from William of Ockham in the 14th century. And it's just a mindset, really, a way of thinking within philosophy, as in go for the simplest answer. And the simplest answer is the correct answer. So it's easy to believe that the universe began by chance, by evolution and natural selection. So that would be the best answer. Believing in God is not simple, therefore it wouldn't be a good answer. Philosophical arguments are weak and have been challenged. Again, think of your course last year when you looked at the cosmological arguments, the teleological, ontological arguments, and try and remember some of the weaknesses you had to evaluate after every argument. What were the weaknesses of all the arguments? If there are weaknesses, then this would make people inclined to not believe in God. The problem of evil, again, you did in year 12, a problem of where is this loving, all-powerful God who could stop all the suffering and pain in the world, but for some reason he watches us suffer. Psychology links religion to emotion. Again, this is quite synoptic as well, if you can refer to your work on Freud and on Jung, especially with Freud saying that the religious mind suffers from an imbalance, a neurosis within the mind. He sees religion as nothing more than a comfort blanket to make us feel safer in life. And he sees it as a childish idea of not being able to deal with the reality of life and looking for somebody to actually look after us in this world. And of course, the guilt of the Oedipus complex. And sociology. Some people within sociology have stated that the purpose of religion is to try and control society. So God is not real. You've got Emile Durkheim. He's stated that the role of religion is to unite communities together, to bring them together, which I'm sure it does. Karl Marx has said that religion is an illusion. It is not reality. God does not exist. And it's just a way of controlling people's behavior. The idea that people have created God and not God has created people. And then you have how religion is depicted in the media, and you have charismatic figures who try and show religion to be quite old-fashioned, outdated. They link it to terrorism, extremism. They see that religion can be oppressive. The new leaders of new atheism are really prominent in every sort of media. We'll come to those in a short while. So if you have a look at these, you've got Ricky Gervais there. He's quite vocal, quite charismatic in his opinions against religion. You may have come across the Four Horsemen, and you get so many memes on social media that are anti-theistic or anti-religious. So those are some examples. So new atheism is the last aspect that we have to look at. So new atheism is an organization in the present century. They seek to replace religious ideas and get rid of religious ideas in modern society. They feel that modern society should not suffer religious ideas or superstition. They try and influence governments, education, and politics, and try and show how irrational religious ideas really are. So these are the four horsemen you may have come across in your course: Richard Dawkins, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, and Christopher Hitchens. They are authors that have written so many books on the belief in God and religions, and trying to either disprove them or show how irrational the religious beliefs are. So I'm sure that you have come across the four horsemen, as they are leading the battle, if you want, as four horsemen against religious beliefs in God. So they are quite vocal. They do protest against religious thoughts, beliefs. And what you have to do within the course is try and look at the three main critiques that they have of religious thoughts and beliefs. So the three critiques that you need to be aware of is the belief that religions are belief without thinking, a non-thinking belief. They can be quite infantile, very childish, and the idea that religions, they impede or they hinder in scientific progress. So what I've done is I've just given you a summary of what all the three actually what they mean, and this will just try and help you strengthen your understanding of the three main critiques of religious belief. So belief without thinking, non-thinking. Richard Dawkins, he said that blind faith has no logic or no evidence, and people believe in things without getting any evidence for what they actually believe. He actually thinks that this is quite a lazy way of thinking, leaving God to fill in the blanks that we have in our knowledge and understanding. He thinks that religious belief is irrational, and says that religion works against scientific evidence. So if you think about many religious believers that would not accept the Big Bang theory or evolution, this is how he thinks that religions work against scientific evidence. He also says that religion is evil, because it doesn't have to justify its claims or the facts. There's no way that they have to try and live up to what they are actually saying. And the fact that religions can't tolerate any arguments against what they are saying. So again, this is why in new atheism, they are a bit vocal. It's no more Mr. Nice Guy. They will actually stand up, and they will try and speak up against religion, and they won't tolerate the idea of not offending them because they are religious. Religion is completely irrational. Dawkins even suggests, perish the thought, that RE lessons in schools are a form of abuse. Now then, so he also links religion to extremism, and has said that this will be a danger for humanity in the future. So if you read his comments over there, he thinks that in the future, some religious fanatics, as he calls them, will get hold of some sort of weapon and will use that to end humanity. Again, religion without belief, you can refer to Sam Harris. Again, Harris saying that it gives people permission to not believe in things without evidence, a very non-scientific way of thinking. Thinks that it's irrational and nothing more than wishes. Again, link this to what Freud has said as religious belief being nothing more than a wish list. He questions whether really do religious believers actually believe in God's existence? Are they just saying that he exists? Because to him, religious beliefs are irrational, and he doesn't really believe that believers, people with a belief in God or religions, actually deep down they do actually believe it. So he questions that. The only thing that can prove existence is empirical science. Lack of evidence is a great threat to religion. Obviously, he's going down the scientific route. The idea of an omnipotent, all-powerful, and all-loving God has come from nothing more than tradition, rather than any evidence. So he does see religions being outdated and antisocial in what they teach in modern society. If you read some of his comments there, you will see that he does try and explain how religions can be seen as antisocial. Infantile is the second critique that they have. Childish, again, link this to Sigmund Freud as well. It's the same kind of mindset, way of thinking. New atheism sees religious belief as childish, being unable to deal with reality and the threats of life and needing something so powerful to look after them. When the going gets tough, there will be something or someone there to look after them, and they will be so powerful that they can do anything. So this is why it's seen as being childish. He goes on to say that feeling that these kind of beliefs are pathetic as compared to empirical ideas of science. And in the modern world, Dawkins says that there's no need for God in the modern world. So again, you can see some of Dawkins' statement and his belief on how harmful religious thought and beliefs can be and how antisocial they are in the modern world. And lastly, impedes and hinders with scientific progress. Religion and science are completely different from each other. Science relies on experiments and empirical evidence, where religion relies on blind faith, accepting things without evidence. Science is rational, religion is not. Science develops understanding and adapts its ideas to new evidence. It's dynamic, it will move. If science finds a new answer, then the old answer will be thrown into the bin, and the new evidence or the new theory will take its place. Religious teachings and holy books, they don't adapt, they don't change. It's the word of God. You don't question it and you accept it, and it doesn't change for many religious beliefs, and therefore it's not dynamic. Religion hinders science because it's not willing to change and forget about any outdated ideas. Not sure if that's completely true, but for many, maybe they would stick to the word of God and they would not be able to be as dynamic and to change their beliefs. So if we have a look at, again, if you have a look at the the specification for WJC, if you could just check and go through everything with that once again. Hopefully we have addressed the first aspect of this part of the course. We will come to the second part in another presentation.